sei qui con me. Questa stanza non ha più pareti, ma alberi.
I'll give you a little bit of background on me, because although I'm working in Barcelona, I'm not from there, and I sort of guess I see myself as a bit of a citizen of the whole world. I have learned some Italian in the last couple of years because my son married an Italian. So I've learned one aspect of the language going through, but I also have a deeper connection. My father was a New Zealand soldier at Monte Cassino, and I guess because he survived, I exist. And so I guess there's quite deep-rooted connections for our family with Italy in different ways. I was talking last night with Alessandra, and I guess sharing a little bit about me before Learnlife, and that's probably important. I was born in New Zealand, and I was at the age of 15, shifted to Australia. I managed to go to 6 different schools during my life. I'm just going to actually put on a timer here. And sorry, I'm just going to switch that one. There we are. 6 different schools across 3 different countries: New Zealand, Australia, and England going through. The best year of schooling for me was when I was 11, because I was traveling on a ship from Auckland to Southampton, and I managed to do the entire year's correspondence paper-based course in 3 weeks on the ship, which gave me an entire year off. And I guess at that stage, exploring castles and Roman ruins in the UK taught me far more about life. In those days, as a family with 4 boys, I have actually climbed Stonehenge and jumped off. You can't do that anymore because the archaeologists have quite rightly located that whole area. But as a child, we did live near there, and that was an afternoon playground. I'm sure many people might be horrified by that, but that was my childhood. But that particular year of being 11, I guess, taught me many things. And as I went back to New Zealand and progressed through to then Australia, I finished up actually really hating school, and I finished up being an extremely good school truant. I knew how to get out of school, and that was easy. What really annoyed my father, who was an ancient history professor, was that I also could do exams easily, and I managed to do very well. And I finished up courtesy of a free scholarship, becoming a teacher. And I guess for me, rules are things to be broken. And so right from my first day of being a teacher through to now, I have enjoyed breaking the rules or finding the gaps in any system that I've worked in. So in Sydney, if you hear my name in Australia, people immediately think of some of the architecture that you can see there. I guess I broke the rules of actually building a building which had no walls on 3 sides. Now, when it was built in 2015, 2016, that was fairly radical. It proved to be the perfect building for a pandemic because the ventilation was fantastic going through. I've also done a technical college course for 3 years in urban horticulture. So the building had to have 18 gardens inside as well going through. It was a fun day when I was explaining to the teachers, we're going to have this building with no walls, and there's going to be 18 gardens, and there's going to be a cafe in the middle, and there's going to be large screens connecting us to the world. They didn't quite understand until they got the building going through. I've also spent time designing furniture. If you ask about me in Australia, that little cloud table that's writable, I was the first person in Australia to start creating writable tables and writable walls. And the perfect maths classroom, for me, mathematics classroom, was a room where you could write on any wall, on any surface, because it made the language of mathematics very visible. and it completely transformed the teaching of mathematics going through. So that was a really interesting thing for me. On the side up here, that was my last gift to the school before I finished after 20 years. That was converting 2 small staff rooms and 3 storerooms into a study space for senior students where they could talk and share and enjoy the community. What we also discovered was that children with autism really loved the back sections where they could sit securely against 2 corners. And they actually asked if they could come there rather than sitting in their normal classrooms and just work all day in that space. So it was a very interesting thing. If you go to other parts of the world, I've spent many months, over 12 years, working with school leaders in Rwanda in the Northern Province, teaching school principals, school leaders, how they might innovate. And so if you ever went there and asked about Stephen, I'm a children's book author, because my experience there of seeing no relevant literary material in the schools was enough for me to then start taking the stories that I was learning in the villages and turn them into bilingual books. That was a great opportunity, and I have about another 5 books in my head ready to unleash when I go back for the first time after the pandemic in 3 weeks' time. Anyway, I'm here today to give you some talk about Learnlife in Barcelona. So in 2017, I worked out that I'd sort of outgrown schools in the system and I needed to work elsewhere. I was also needing to finish off my PhD at that time. And so I had met up with Christopher Pomerenning, who was the person that David Price referred to this morning as the founder of Learnlife. And I became a co-founder of that project, which meant at the time I was living across 2 cities because I had aging parents in Sydney and a project in Barcelona. So I was doing 2 months in Barcelona, 1 month in Sydney going through. Sadly, but in the passage of life, all of my parents and parents-in-law, they've all passed away in the last 12 months in a short space of time, which is now opening up, I guess, new opportunities for me in different ways. But look, we live in a VUCA world. You may have heard of that word. It came out of American military terminology in the 1990s. It's describing a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity going through. In the 1990s, that seemed strange, but when you think about it from the year 2001 with the attack on New York City, and then everything that's happened since then, it's an extremely good understanding of this world that's there. Now, this McKinsey report, I find really interesting as well. I first did use it back in 2012. Here we are 1 decade later, and it's still totally correct, and we've done so little to address it. The growing mismatch between what's happening in schools and the 21st century workplace. This is a very important diagram. Actually, I first saw Valerie Hannon, again mentioned this morning, use it. I guess the red curve represents the schools as we know them at the moment, sadly, in so many countries and in so many ways. And the green is our aspiration for where we want to take education. But as long as we have the systems of the old school, the examinations, the focus on parents thinking children have to learn this content and this curriculum, the teachers get thrown into that hatched world, which is a world of angst for all of us, because we're caught between the old and the new and what we want to do. And I guess Learnlife has been the opportunity to do something about that. Because the reality is that we cannot teach people to be creative by giving them standard tasks. That's crazy. We cannot teach people to be collaborative by putting them in competition with each other. And I think one of the hardest things for the teaching workforce around the world is that as teachers, we're trained to be solo operators in a classroom. Can we manage that one space? We're not trained to be collaborative. I think collaboration is the greatest skill teachers need to try and learn, because we were never really taught what collaboration was in the first place. And how can we teach the next generation to collaborate if we ourselves can't collaborate? We can't teach people to be lifelong learners if we deprive them of self-exploration and the courage to learn. Again, we've got to have that courage to allow the mistakes. When we fail forward, that's an extremely simple concept, but because we have this control mindset, we resist it. We can't teach people to be empathic if we continually downplay emotions. I loved Marigold's talk beforehand. You can't go into a school and say, let's have a 5-minute talk on well-being, and then we'll get back to the textbooks. That's just utterly crazy. School has to fundamentally change to address the issues of well-being. Has to be fundamentally different, because we have no real idea of the impact of the pandemic or the war or climate change on the minds of the next generation. And we can't teach people to be growth-oriented if we're afraid of change ourselves. I guess that's one of the things I've learned through being in schools for 45 years, as the person that was avoiding school before that. There are gaps in the systems. I've gone to the government and said, I want to be the innovation school in your system in Australia. Can you tell me what I can get away with? And they told me. They said, we want you to be innovative. We want you to find the gaps because we want to show people that you can do it. And you've got to take risks. And you've got to get the parents on side to say you're not playing with their children. You're taking a calculated step to allow the children to learn to explore and become curious. As we've heard many times already today, the current education system, it's past its shelf life completely. If it was a food product in a supermarket, it would give us food poisoning. It's well past its use-by date. I'm not going to go through this slide. The important part is the two diagrams on the right-hand side brought together there. This is from a Russian guy, Pavel Dushka. All of the education systems that we're working for are represented in that little red area. We start focusing on education around the age of 5, possibly a little earlier. It sort of peaks when it gets to university age, and then it tapers off. It is so utterly useless when we talk about lifelong learning, which is represented by the blue. We were hearing beforehand between 5 to 7 changes, possibly in a person's working career going through, and it's only going to continue. Lifelong learning needs to be a skill that we can all do. And the job market is changing. We've heard all about automation. We've heard about that, the ability of youths to find work in areas that don't currently exist. And we've heard about COVID again today, that it's continuing to send the shockwaves through the education world and many schools and parents. I think one of the shockwaves that I'm hearing about now is the number of teachers who are starting to drop out. They're fed up, they're tired, they're not happy with the systems, the change hasn't happened, and so they're going to new careers, going through. They're becoming the lifelong learners. But it's up to us. We're the educators. We have to open the door. We have to make the changes going through. And Learnlife is trying to do that. Now, I guess in one sense, Learnlife is cheeky. It's taking risks. The decision with Learnlife was to say, okay, we're going to ignore the government rules in Barcelona and Catalonia. We're going to force the government to follow us and to change what they're doing. And we've been doing that now for 6 years. What was very interesting on one occasion when we got asked to come to the Department of Education, not quite sure what we were about to receive, was that they introduced us as a school that was being innovative in Catalonia. It was the reverse of what we were expecting going through. So again, the encouragement here is that in your own little world, the classroom space and in your school, you can become the agent of change just as Learnlife has done. You don't have to wait until the whole system changes. And how does it happen? Well, I guess we've been putting a lot of focus onto growing lifelong learning. And it's all about those self-management, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-responsibility, self-determination, self-reflection, self-direction, self-efficacy. They're all big words, aren't they? Underneath all of those is a level of self-awareness, deliberately not there because it's part of everything that's there. But the question is, how do we actually get kids to become agents of their own learning? Well, we're all on this continuum from standardized through to what I call personal learning. The word personalized learning for me still suggests that the teacher or a computer algorithm is deciding what you do. And that's still not full learner agency. So I want to get people to that point where they can actually understand, how do I learn for myself? How do I self-direct? How do I self-determine? Well, you've got to break that down then into the components. And that's what Learnlife has been doing, is saying, well, you know, self-determination, it's all about understanding purpose, making choices, decision-making, problem-solving. You'll get these presentations afterwards and you can take a photograph now. So I'm not going to go through all of those. But the point here is that as teachers, we need to understand the actual skills involved to make sure that our kids are having the opportunity to experience that in their learning. We've also learnt through the pandemic, and I guess this was another area that if you were in Sydney and asked about me, we were the first school in 2005 to offer fully online courses to senior students as an option going through. So we'd been doing it for 15 years before the pandemic came. That's in the Sydney context. In the Barcelona context, we shifted in 24 hours from face-to-face to online. I love the fact that Germany and Spain encouraged all schools to shift online, but they didn't change their policy, which banned homeschooling. Typical government. But for me now, personal learning means that wherever you are, wherever you wander in the world, that the learning will follow you. You don't have to change one system and go to another one. It's called high flex learning. If you look that one up, high flex learning is where learning is either face-to-face or online, blended, but it follows you wherever you are. So at Learnlife, we've read about the neuroscience and we understand it. We learn from the research and we're choosing to do it. And we learn from best practice and we choose to apply it. You know, we researched schools all around the world. I guess for me, as part of my PhD research as well, I was quite familiar, and Christopher and others looked at best examples that they could find from around the world. They looked at best practice, they looked at the research, and they looked at the community of innovators that we could pull together to create what we call our roadmap for implementing and change. And I'm going to talk about that again, and not in detail. All of this is available on the website, on the learnlife.com website. But basically, I guess I was able to pull through the help of my team, the idea that there were about 21 concepts that were really important if you wanted to change. And we're talking about an ecosystem change. Now, we haven't really focused on what is a learning ecosystem. And I guess I tried to do that this morning. You know, for me, it's about the people, the environment, the relationships, and the codependencies within that as well, going through. And I guess we have to ask ourselves, what is the learning ecosystem where I work? Is it healthy? Would I want to be there? And what can I do about changing it? Well, the paradigm, which is available on the website, lists multiple areas as you're preparing an ecosystem for change. This is the big one that governments completely ignore. How do you actually get people ready for change going through? There should be a Ministry of Learning Culture in every country. Forget the Ministry for Education. It should be the Ministry of Learning Culture, because if we don't get that right, change doesn't happen. So I then look at 7 areas where you implement change and 7 areas where you have to then support the change in different ways. So that paradigm exists on the website. You can go through, there are papers you can download on every one of those topics. It's not a textbook for change. You pick and choose what's relevant to your context, never as the intention that you go through from 1 to 21. We've also focused during that time on capturing different learning methodologies from around the world. And we've got 28 of those captured as well, just to help schools understand they need to be training their teachers into, say, half a dozen different methodologies if you want to be able to change, because how else are they going to do it? And we've created this framework, which is all about relationships initially, Yeah, it's the Italian version up there. It's about kids understanding purpose. It's about giving them the skills for lifelong learning. It's then about those diverse learning experiences that we heard all about from High Tech High, and we've heard about from other places as well. And then it's about making learning visible. That just doesn't mean getting an exam mark. That means, how do you know about the learning in this place, on the walls, in the people, around the culture? And then what's the impact of that learning? Because we want the kids to change the world. But it all starts with relationships. You've heard this today over and over again. This is a hard one for teachers, because teachers are measured, can they control the kids? We've got to wipe that one out. Teachers need to learn high EQ abilities, emotional quotient. They need to be able to relate, because research shows that's the foundation. So very quickly, the Barcelona hubs, you've seen that picture beforehand. There's one in the urban hub for secondary students, for teenagers, and the eco hub for primary age. The experiences, the eco hub has the benefit of being in nature, and the urban hub, the benefit of actually being in the city, which is full of startups and lots of opportunities as well. The programs are divided into what's globally accepted as those stages. Stage of learning is 2 years going through. So we call them adventurers, discoverers, pioneers. And what do they do in the primary? Well, they learn to think, to be, to live, to relate, to do. And we've sort of captured the different competencies under those particular headings as well. And how do we cope with the content? Well, the team have put together an amazing program, because they've created the building blocks for change. So a building block might be science related, or it might be politics related, or citizenship related, but then it's under a completely different heading, like around the world or connect or something else like that. So we've created new headings for transdisciplinary learning. This is in the primary section. And in the secondary section, again, the 3 groups: explorers, creators, and change makers, going from 11 to 18-year-olds. And it's all about connection, as you can see there, number 1. It's all about still having the core concepts covered. It's about community, because we need to celebrate the learning, and the kids need to know that they're part of a community. And it's based in a studio model, where the kids are spending a lot of time in a variety of studios. It's about 15 different studios at the moment for that learning spaces. And also they love the adelantes, Spanish word for moving forward, some of you might know, but they're basically student-led, learner-led, passion-inspired workshops on topics that the kids are choosing themselves going through. So what does it start with? It starts with vision. And if you are at all bored at night and can't sleep, and you look up my name and the University of Technology, Sydney, my PhD thesis is on the role of vision to establish and sustain change in schools. And that was, I guess, my passion when I did that, finished that about 5 years ago now, because I see that if you cannot paint a clear vision of what you want moving forward, well, then there's no pathway. So the schools together collectively need to envision, where do we want to be at the end of 1 year? Where do we want to be at the end of 5 years? Where do we want to be in 2030? If you can't articulate that vision with clarity, and if the teachers don't grow that vision immediately, it was never vision. If you want to know more about us, Instagram, we are Learnlife. You can join an alliance of educators. And on that learnlife.com website, we actually have an event coming up called Inspire. It's on the 10th and 11th of November. And we've invited people from around the world to come and spend 2 days with us in Barcelona, seeing the hubs. And we're going to run some workshops on space, on vision, on all of those topics of change. So if you have the availability to come, you are very, very welcome. If you want to visit at other times, you're also welcome to do that. And one of my current roles is that we're developing a training program to turn teachers into learning guides, so that we actually have a program there that's already kicked off. It goes for a year, but people can join for 1 session, they can join for 2 sessions per month, or they can join for the whole 12 months if they wish to. So it's deliberately focused on those different topics that we've had. and thank you for being a very patient audience. Thank you.
Quando sei qui con me, questa stanza non ha più pareti,